You know what this is right here, pal? Huh, tough guy? You feeling lucky? Yeah, that's right. Spirit fingers. Do you know why? Because it's been about 30 hours since I last slept, and I've done 3 different intros, all of which crash and burned, and I am off my gourd, so now I'm going wacko mode. But, even in my sleep-deprived state, I am still lucid enough to recognize how cattywampus the AAA gaming space has become. Like, the gaming industry has so many things that I have bitched and moaned about. Probably the biggest practice that I've been most vocal about, not exactly shy on, is the topic of you will own nothing and be happy. The Ubisoft motto. God rest that company's soul. What a pile of dog shit. But it's not just Ubisoft. That has become a prevalent business strategy across the gaming industry. You will own nothing. You will be happy. You're basically... You come away with the idea of ownership of whatever games you purchase. I've worn this topic out more than a fleshlight in a frat house, but it is something I am very passionate about. The gaming industry is getting away with more and more garbage where they'll take a shit in your mouth and you're expected to thank them for adding some flavor to your taste buds. It's terrible. And there is an initiative that has been aiming to fight back against a lot of these practices that I think really need some big overhaul. And it's an initiative that I think a lot of you are probably very familiar with. It's called Stop Killing Games. And I've followed it since its inception. I've talked about it on stream quite a few times, though this is my first video going over it. And I regret that now because I see it wasn't going as well as I thought it was. Admittedly, I didn't follow how successful the initiative was, only that it was aiming to do good for consumers, and that it was taking proper steps legally to get there, and it was going through all of the right channels. And now today I watched a video from the guy that's spearheading this. His name is Ross. He posted a video called The End of Stop Killing Games where he's giving an update on where everything's at and how it's kind of at the finish line here with a lot of failure to show for it, with only a few other chances to fight back. Now, before getting into the weeds on the topic, I want to get this in the beginning because I imagine the vast majority of people won't watch the whole thing. I'm putting a link to the full video on Stop Killing Games, as well as a link to where you'd go to help support the Stop Killing Games initiative, because there's only a little bit of time left for the most important parts of it now that it's at the end. So if you know what the movement is and want to support it but didn't know where, the resources are in the description, or if you want to get it right from like the source, I have a link to his video. But I want to go into it myself here because it is a topic that I do feel very strongly about. But for those that don't know anything about Stop Killing Games, I'm going to let him explain it in his own words, so that way you can get an actual, correct, informed explanation of what the initiative is. And the reason I say it like that, kind of like fucking all, pinky out, snooty, is because a lot of people don't even really know what this is because of people like Pirate Software completely misrepresenting what the initiative was.
As a refresher, Stop Killing Games is a consumer movement to stop publishers from effectively destroying video games they have already sold to customers.
I'll pause right there. The simplest, bare bones, birthday suit, butt-ass naked explanation for what this is. Stop destroying things that people have paid money to own. I think that is a very understandable, very reasonable take. Very agreeable. Now I want to quickly jump to a different spot in this video because I think it's important to have this in the beginning because it's something a lot of people have heard that comes from someone that is just wrong about it. It's the Pirate Software portion. Ross is addressing the video Pirate Software made many months ago. Ross even says that he didn't plan on doing that because he didn't want to be seen as using this for drama farming, because it would start to make the movement look less of like a legitimate initiative and more of just like drama slop content type thing. But he finally starts talking about Pirate Software here because it's at the end of the life cycle of this initiative and it's not looking promising, so he's willing to do anything to try and set the record straight and hopefully start getting more momentum back to the movement, because the damage Pirate Software did to it through his video was substantial.
This video came out right as we were building momentum, then except for one boost in Germany, the signatures started drying up like clockwork. Ford does not understand what Stop Killing Games is. Here it is in his words.
So for those who don't understand, the Stop Killing Games initiatives is basically we don't want single-player games
No.
to have DRM that the developers can turn off and thus render the single-player games inactive anymore. This is what they want to change. They need to be specific that they're talking about single-player games that do not need a server to support them.
No.
And as much as they want it to be about specifically games where it is a single-player game that has always online functionality, it would impact every live service game that exists, instead of just targeting single-player, always online games.
No, that's not what it is. Stop Killing Games includes single-player games, but nothing about it is specific to them. He completely made that up, and I have no idea where he got that impression. It's the first line on the website. Stop Killing Games is a consumer movement started to challenge the legality of publishers destroying video games they have sold to customers. But the movement includes all this stuff from earlier, and he was mostly talking about the initiative.
He didn't even get the Cliff Notes summary right. He missed all the QTEs and got the bad ending on understanding the initiative from the jump here. Ross is correct. This has nothing to do with just single-player only games that require an online connection, that when the online connection is severed, you lose access to the game. Like, yeah, that is included in all of this, but that's not like what the whole movement is about. And for some reason, Pirate Software is stun-locked on that, like fixated, as if that is the actual like meat and potatoes of Stop Killing Games. They need to be more specific in their language about it being single-player, always online connectivity games. When that's just not what it's about. Like, they're not being specific about that because that is not what they are specifically targeting. It is about the whole practice of destroying games that consumers have already purchased and having no end-of-life plans for games that are being sunset. So, for example, The Crew. The Crew is an example everyone is going to reference and talk about because Ubisoft is still currently in a lawsuit battling against it for what happened with this game. I've yapped about it quite a bit, so I'm not just going to regurgitate that. I'm sure a lot of you already know this story about it. But basically, you buy The Crew, Ubisoft pulls the plug on the servers, you can't play The Crew anymore, now it's just an old wet dream of what once was. And they are facing a lawsuit, and while this is in the umbrella of Stop Killing Games, it is not the only thing Stop Killing Games is referencing when it comes to this practice. Pirate Software is so hung up on it being single-player games that people lose access to, when that is a component of it, but not the entire focus.
Well, the short version is the initiative is about requiring publishers to have end-of-life plans for games they've sold to customers in the future. So when they shut them down, customers can continue running them without their support. So that's one thing Thor doesn't understand, but he also seems to think this is about converting multiplayer games to single-player.
Transitioning an entire multiplayer server-side game into a single-player video game, which means rebalancing the entire experience around single-player, rebuilding everything in the entire game. How are you going to do that with Final Fantasy XIV? You're just going to make all the raids soloable? Imagine the day that World of Warcraft shuts down, and suddenly you have to make it a single-player game for every individual that ever bought the game. That's what they're asking for.
No.
Because they would have to sunset live service games as a single-player experience. The idea that suddenly you need to make every single live service game playable single-player offline? No, dude.
Correct. No.
This part is more confusing than Finnegan's Wake, because nowhere in anything on Stop Killing Games has this even been like a talking point from anyone besides Pirate Software. I don't know where he pieced this puzzle together. Like I don't get it. Like, if I'm gonna try and like really reach here and give like a charitable explanation for this take, maybe he's extrapolating based on the idea that if publishers have to have end-of-life plans for their games, that includes MMOs, where once the game is getting sunset, you're pulling the plug on it, you would then need to turn the game over to the community in a playable state, an accessible state, like give the code to them. Thus, it'd turn it into a single-player experience, so the onus would be on the developers to rebalance their game to be a single-player experience for them? I guess. I have no idea. That still just doesn't make any sense, but maybe that's the tree he's barking up with that thought process. I really don't know, because Stop Killing Games at no point ever says any of these multiplayer games need to be converted to single player. That really is outlandish. And the more I think about it, like, the more nonsensical it becomes, because even in Pirate Software's hypothetical fanfic there, why would the developers need to rebalance the game? They would just turn over the code to the community and just it'd be in that state. They're no longer responsible for balancing the game. That's the whole point. They're not indefinitely supporting it. They would just be responsible of leaving the game in an accessible state to the community while they would shut down the servers on their end. Like, they wouldn't need to go back through with a whole development team and, like, you know, tweak the game to be single player compatible. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, I really do not understand that one. But apparently a lot of people latched on to that talking point from Pirate Software as something that Stop Killing Games was asking for and how unreasonable it was. Which, if that's what Stop Killing Games was asking for, it would be unreasonable. But that's not what it's asking for.
Nowhere in there does it say that it's directly targeting always online single-player games.
Oh, he's so close. He's so close to getting it.
It is vague, and because of that, it will impact.
He never has that light bulb moment. Well, he is correct in that statement. It's almost as if that's not what the initiative is asking for.
I know this part is once again just reinforcing that he doesn't know what the Stop Killing Games movement is about, but I have to just show you this because it is so fascinating, because he himself literally calls out that Stop Killing Games at no point explicitly mentions single-player always-online games or anything like that. And for some reason, instead of following the breadcrumbs that would naturally lead him to the conclusion of, oh, maybe I misunderstood, maybe, because it's absent here, that's not what this is actually about. Instead, he uses it as a criticism against the Stop Killing Games initiative entirely, saying it's just too vague, it's way too vague. The reason it is not explicitly stated there is because that is not what the whole initiative is about. It is not specifically targeting that thing that you keep saying that it is. I don't know how that never clicked.
But those were his streams with a smaller audience. What does he say in his big YouTube video with over 1 million views that he had time to research?
If we're trying to kill off the practice of developers putting together a live service game, pitching it as a single-player experience, and then taking away support in the future.
Now he's changed it again and is making up how it's about single-player games are advertised. What is he doing?
It needs to be specific about the business practice it's trying to defeat, which is specifically companies that are doing this under the guise of it being a single-player game, but adding online-only functionality that is not necessary and doesn't add any gameplay elements. That's the problem.
No, that's not it at all.
This is a really strong section from Ross here because the clips that you saw moments ago were from his stream. When he took more time to watch it and digest it, he still came back in that video misrepresenting it. Like, it never dawned on him. Like, on stream, he could write it off as like, oh, he didn't grasp it in the moment, maybe later on he did. Well, then he made the video where he still was talking about things that are just not what Stop Killing Games was about, and this was the one that really blew up and really started to kind of dismantle the Stop Killing Games momentum.
If we don't like the idea of live service games as a whole, I get it. Don't play live service games then. Don't agree to those terms.
No, he's getting a new thing wrong now. We're not against them existing. We're against them being destroyed with no recourse for the customer.
Pirate Software then goes on to talk about like the business practice of misleading consumers into thinking that what they're buying is a product as opposed to a license to a product, which is a totally separate thing. And then he criticizes Stop Killing Games for not being specific about that thing that he is bringing up, as opposed to what Stop Killing Games is talking about. So he's using that against them for some reason. And then Ross goes into like the license talk.
Our problem is not with licenses failing to inform people. Blizzard says they can take away your purchase for no reason. That sounds pretty clear to me. Our problem is those terms are so hostile to consumers and the medium that they should be taken off the table entirely. This needs regulation. Forget video games. If you look at basic commerce for hundreds of years, when you paid money, you either got to keep what you paid for, or if it was a service, you were told when your access ends. The vast majority of online-only games do neither of those.
He's exactly right. That is a huge problem. Now, Pirate Software is correct here about these companies that will mislead consumers through this fraudulent advertising on what you're actually buying, because in a lot of cases, you don't own any of the shit that you are buying. It is pretty much a rental. You get a permission slip to access the content. That is an issue, and not making it abundantly clear to consumers that that is what you are buying is a problem. And so too is the actual agreements, as Ross demonstrates with Blizzard, where it says they can just completely terminate it for no reason at all. It really does go against the basic idea of commerce entirely. Video games are in a totally different ball game when it comes to that, because half the time you don't realize that you're just buying an admission ticket to a game. You're not actually buying the game. You also don't know how long that's going to last. Again, to go back to Concord, that shit lasted less than a fucking rainstorm, basically. Like, there is just so many problems. So I don't know why Pirate Software would be so harsh on Stop Killing Games for not addressing specific things that he himself is bringing up or making up in regards to it. It just doesn't compute. It really is a video that did significant damage to an actually positive initiative that aimed to help consumers in the video game space. All based on his complete misrepresentation of it, which was a complete mess.
If you try to tell me that every studio needs to run their live service game indefinitely or not want to run one at all, then no one's going to run them.
Oh no! He wheeled out that line about publishers having to support the game forever. He was literally watching the video earlier where it says it won't do that in big letters. That wasn't enough. We just can't stop gamers from going there, even when we spell it out.
That's the last clip I want to show from this section on the Pirate Software video, but it's a very important one because this is something a lot of people also think the Stop Killing Games initiative is about, where developers, publishers will have to support their games forever. Like, until the fucking heat death of the universe, they'll have to support these games under the initiative. When that is not the case. It is very simply asking that when the game has reached the end of its life cycle, the publishers, developers don't want to work on it any longer, to turn it over to the community to still be in a playable, accessible state so the product can still exist. There is some more nuance, obviously, to how that works, given, like, publisher-developer licensing and a lot of, like, the code, the binary, that kind of thing. There is a lot at play under the hood there, of course, but it is something that Stop Killing Games isn't naive to, and it is something that is talked about. But I'm not going to dive too deep into it. I encourage you to check more in on it. But this whole belief that it is about endlessly supporting a live service game, even when it makes no sense to do so and it's beyond dead and in the dirt, is ridiculous, because that is not what it is asking for. And a lot of people think that it is. It's not. Pirate Software got that wrong as well. Anyway, I'll stop yapping about it, but as mentioned in the beginning, most of Stop Killing Games hasn't been successful in getting change. And Ross has dedicated so much of his life to this, and it's clearly taken a big toll. Now he's doing everything he can for this last-ditch push to try and help. And there are two big things coming up that can do so. And it's what I linked at the very beginning of the at the very beginning of the video about the resources in the description. It's in regards to this.
One is for the UK to sign a government petition to bring this issue before Parliament. Though, keeping it real, I'm not terribly optimistic about this one, since the government response has been a mess by every definition. But the one that has a lot of power, so much so I think it could change the course of gaming history, is the European Citizens Initiative. Now, I said I'm approaching this like a time traveler because with the trajectory we're on, these are both going to fail. Again, this one is crazy powerful, but the hurdle we just couldn't get past was that it requires 1 million signatures from citizens of EU countries, and we've only made it just under halfway. What a lot of people don't realize is that in the EU especially, it's almost a state of lawlessness regarding the practice of game destruction, is that the vast majority of games with an online requirement say they can be terminated at any time for any reason. Or Blizzard likes to say any or no reason. But according to the EU Commission, that might be a violation of Directive 93/13 EEC, which protects consumers against unfair terms and consumer contracts. So if that term is unfair, that means that part of the contract is null and void.
He goes on to explain how powerful that can be because of what a mess that is. Because there is so much gray area with how the video games currently operate in regards to those protections, it would be a legal headache that would require an analysis of the laws or implementation of new laws that could lead to, hopefully, an improvement when it comes to gaming. So the big hurdle was the signatures, needing 1 million, and currently it's at like 460,000, so it doesn't reach the threshold. I've been very vocal from the very beginning about how little faith I have in petitions, but that's just from the perspective of an American. In America, petitions are more worthless than toilet paper. You're better off just writing what you want on a note to Santa Claus and shipping it to the North Pole than you are doing anything with a petition in this country. I don't know how different it is in the EU. Maybe it really is this powerful there that could lead to substantial change and improvement when it comes to games and preservation and all of what we've already talked about. Hopefully, I mean, that's really all that's left for the Stop Killing Games initiative, which sucks, but that's the position that it's in, unfortunately. And I wanted to talk about it because I really want to see something change with the games industry. I've said that so many times recently, but it's in such a sorry state. I mean, I'm talking big budget AAA space. Indies, I think, are absolutely crushing it, absolutely golden right now in the golden age of indie games, but overall, in the big budget games and the way the industry keeps pushing things, it sucks. So I wanted to talk about Stop Killing Games here. Hopefully things can turn around and maybe a huge W's around the corner for the Stop Killing Games initiative. We'll see. But anyway, I want to commend Ross for his hard work spearheading all of this for so long. And that's really about it. See ya.